Jamin AI. Jamin AI.
Nobody wants to hear the prophets because they have entered Yahweh's kingdom of heaven and returned with a critique of the God's kingdom of Babel. Such a message is especially annoying to the rich and powerful, for Babel has benefited them quite well, and they do not desire an alternative way of doing things. Indeed, they assume it must be going so well for them because they have divine favor. So who are these human messengers telling them otherwise? They're probably just poor, bitter people who are sad that it hasn't worked out so well for them. But the prophets can't stop prophesying. The message of Yahweh overwhelms their hearts like a fire in their bones. They have to speak. They must speak. If they don't, they'll explode. And so out of their mouths pour the convictions of heaven, which come flowing out in the form of judgment. Justice is at the heart of Yahweh's words, for the world was built for justice, and Yahweh feels passionately about injustice. As he sees the poor, the oppressed, and the marginalized, he cries out on behalf of the kingdom of heaven. If injustice should not be found in the gods, then it should not be found in humans either. In the same way that the gods use their power to oppress humans, humans with greater status use their power to oppress other humans, even though they're all made in the image of Yahweh. The sons of God were not supposed to do this. Humans were not supposed to do this. Babel is not allowed to do this. It is a perversion of the kind of kingdom Yahweh desires to bring to the earth. Yahweh is patient, but we must change our ways quickly or face the consequences. This dynamic put the prophet in a bit of a catch-22. As Yahweh revealed to Jeremiah, Yahweh can always choose to dismiss the consequences of his prophetic declarations. So if he speaks judgment and people repent, he will remove the prophesied consequences, just as they hoped he would. But because no consequence then happens, his messengers suddenly look like false prophets. Was anything ever going to happen in the first place? Many would question. But the prophets know what they've heard, whether people believe them or not. And even if they somehow hadn't heard Yahweh correctly, their message of justice would be no less the prophetic message of Yahweh. For his concern for the poor never changes, whether he specifically anointed someone to say it or not. Just as we cannot be wrong when we proclaim Yahweh's love, so we cannot be wrong when we proclaim Yahweh's desire for justice, for these themes belong together. And so the prophets try to serve as a bridge between heaven and Babel, with the hope of overriding the ways of Babel with the ways of heaven. They try to work over their society in every conceivable way. They proclaim their messages. They write poetry and fiction. They put on performances. They become living parables. They call out the rich, and they defend the poor. And they participate in politics, reporting their heavenly messages to kings who are supposed to listen, but are often not open to their critique. Bad kings especially didn't want to hear the prophets, and instead surrounded themselves with yes men in the guise of prophets. For example, when King Ahab wanted to go to war, he inquired of 400 of his own personal prophets, who all gave him the answer he wanted to hear. Ahab was then pressed to ask an actual prophet of Yahweh, which he did not want to do. "I hate him," he said, "for he never prophesies good concerning me, but evil." The prophets are clearly not in this line of work to be popular, for there is no such perk. If you wanted someone to tell you what you wanted to hear, there were hundreds of false prophets you could ask. If you wanted someone to actually check in with heaven on your behalf, you could ask one of the real ones. but a heavenly response could cause the prophet to face jail time or death. For Babel, its gods and its kings have little space for truth-tellers, Yahweh's messengers, or heaven's politics. The earthly messengers of heaven were more likely considered infamous than famous, for they were known to poke the beast. There are all kinds of labels society then, and now would have slapped on them in attempts to silence them. They were woke for believing in the stories of the marginalized. They were instigators for telling society that the lives of minorities matter. They were rebels for not just going with the flow of the majority. They were liberals for wanting politicians to help the poor. They were progressives for believing that society had to change because the status quo was not good enough. They were communists for believing that all humans should care for one another. They were bad people for they were imprisoned or killed for their words. And that only happens to bad people, not prophets, right?
I hear the whisper in the quiet night, a voice that burns, that fills me with light. It's not for the proud, it's not for the throne. It's for the broken, the lost, the alone. But they say I'm too loud, they don't want to know. This fire in my bones won't let me go. I'm crying out for justice, shouting for the truth, a voice for the oppressed, the forgotten youth. Though the world turns away, I'll stand on my own with a fire in my heart and a blaze in my bones. Oh, 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 oh. The kings build their towers, reaching the skies, but Babel's kingdom is crumbling in lies. The prophets were hated, their words brought fear, yet heaven's song is the one I hear. They call me a rebel, they call me insane, but heaven's message will always remain. I'm crying out for justice, shouting for the truth, a voice for the oppressed, the forgotten youth. Though the world turns away, I'll stand on my own with a fire in my heart and a blaze in my bones. Oh, oh, oh. They label me woke, a fool for the fight, but I see the world in a different light. The poor and the hurting, they bear Yahweh's name, and justice is coming, it won't be the same. I'm crying out for justice, shouting for the truth, a voice for the oppressed, the forgotten youth. Though the world turns away, I'll stand on my own with a fire in my heart and a blaze in my bones. Oh, oh, so let Babel shake, let the mighty fall. Yahweh's kingdom will shine it all. The prophets keep speaking, we're not alone, with heaven's fire burning in our bones.
Okay, so today we're diving into something pretty fascinating.
Oh,
The role of prophets in society.
okay.
And more specifically, why those advocating for justice and righteousness were often seen as
Right.
troublemakers.
Right.
And we're going to be looking at Jamin Bradley's Supernatural Justice
Okay.
to help unpack this.
Yeah, that's a great source to use for this topic.
And I'm really excited to dive into this with you.
Yeah, me too.
Um,
So where should we start?
well, let's start right at the beginning.
Okay.
Like right off the bat,
Sure.
Bradley introduces this idea of two contrasting kingdoms.
Oh yeah, Yahweh's kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of Babel.
Right. And it suggests that prophets, having experienced the justice of this divine kingdom, return to the existing societal order,
Right.
which he calls Babel,
Babel, yeah.
with a very critical eye.
Yeah, it's almost like they're coming back from a trip to this ideal society.
Right.
And they're seeing their own world in a whole new light.
Okay. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So how does that actually play out?
Well,
I mean, is their critique welcomed?
I mean,
Let's see.
imagine returning from a place where everything is fair and just,
Right.
only to find yourself back in a world where injustice is rampant.
Oh, yes.
You'd probably have a lot to say, wouldn't you?
You would have a lot to say.
But those in power, they often see their own success as a sign of divine favor.
Interesting.
So why should they listen to these prophets who they perceive as poor, bitter people?
That's such an interesting point.
Yeah.
Because it really highlights this inherent clash
Yeah,
between those who benefit from the status quo
totally.
and those who challenge it.
And the prophets, they're caught right in the middle of that.
And the prophets are stuck right in the middle.
Yeah, fueled by their experiences
Yeah.
and their understanding of justice.
It must have been incredibly difficult to speak out against the grain like that.
It was, and Bradley really emphasizes this incredible compulsion
Yeah.
they felt to speak the truth.
Yeah.
He describes it as a fire in their bones,
Wow.
this irresistible urge
Yeah.
to deliver their message,
Right.
even when it's risky.
Yeah. Have you ever felt so strongly
Oh, yeah,
about something that you just had to speak up,
absolutely.
even if it meant kind of rocking the boat a little
It's
bit?
a time.
Yeah, me too.
It's like you can't stay silent even if it's uncomfortable.
Right. It makes me think of that saying,
Yeah.
the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing.
Right.
But, this raises another question.
Yeah.
What exactly was at the core of their message?
It's a good question.
Like, what were they actually fighting for?
Well, according to Bradley, the central theme running through all of this
That's
is
right.
justice.
Okay.
Yahweh's concern for the poor, the oppressed, the marginalized.
Right.
Those are the driving forces behind the prophet's call for change.
Yeah.
It's not just about abstract principles.
Right.
It's about aligning human actions
Mhm.
with a higher standard of fairness and righteousness.
So they're essentially saying, look, if even the gods in your belief system hate oppression, shouldn't you hate it too?
Exactly.
It's like they're holding up a mirror to society
Yeah.
and saying, this isn't right. We need to do better.
Precisely. And it's not just about criticizing the status quo.
Right.
They're actually trying to bridge this gap between heaven and earth,
Oh, okay.
between the ideal and the reality.
But this is where it gets really interesting.
Right.
So tell me more about these methods.
Yeah.
I'm picturing them standing on street corners, shouting from the rooftops.
Sure. Yeah.
But I bet there's more to it than that.
It's so much more diverse than that.
Okay.
They used proclamations and writings,
Okay.
but also poetry, fiction, even performances.
Wow.
Imagine prophets using theater
Wow.
or storytelling to convey their message.
That's incredible.
It's amazing.
Like they understood the power of storytelling.
Right.
Like using different mediums to connect with people on an emotional level.
Exactly.
But did everybody buy into this?
Well-
I mean, weren't there those who just flat out rejected their message?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Bradley highlights this really fascinating catch-22
Okay.
that prophets often faced.
Okay.
He uses the example of Jeremiah.
Mhm.
So imagine this. A prophet warns of impending judgment,
Okay.
but the people actually heed the warning and repent.
Right.
The predicted consequences might not happen,
Mhm.
making the prophet appear false,
Yeah.
even though they were telling the truth.
That's a tough situation.
It is a tough situation.
They're damned if they do and damned if they don't.
Exactly.
Makes you wonder how activists today deal with this kind of dilemma.
Yeah, that's a challenge that seems to transcend time.
Right. And speaking of those who resisted the prophet's message,
Yes.
Bradley uses a classic example. King Ahab.
Yeah.
Instead of listening to a true prophet of Yahweh,
Right.
he surrounded himself with yes-men prophets
Yes.
who told him exactly what he wanted to hear.
Classic echo chamber.
Oh, it's a classic.
Yeah.
And it's a timeless tale, isn't it?
Those in power.
Yeah.
They surround themselves with people who reinforce their existing beliefs.
Yeah. Making it even harder for
Right.
dissenting voices to be heard.
And it's not just kings and rulers who fall into this trap.
No, it's not.
I think we all have our own biases.
We do.
And our own blind spots.
Yeah, it's so easy to surround ourselves with information that confirms what we already believe.
Yeah.
But the real challenge is to be open to perspectives that challenge our assumptions
Yes.
and force us to see the world in a new light.
And that's precisely what the prophets were trying to do.
Yes.
Shake people out of their complacency.
Totally.
And make them confront uncomfortable truths.
They were definitely disruptors,
Yeah, they were.
and that didn't always make them the most popular figures.
I imagine not.
Bradley even mentions a whole list of labels
Yeah.
used to discredit prophets
Oh, wow.
throughout history.
Okay.
Woke, instigators, rebels, liberals, progressives, communists.
Wow, that's a long list. Terms often used to dismiss dissenting voices.
Right.
And maintain the status quo.
Right.
It's a tactic as old as time.
Wow, it makes you wonder what labels are being used today
That's a great question.
to silence those who are fighting for justice and change.
Yeah.
And how can we become more aware of these tactics
Yes.
so that we can resist them?
It's definitely food for thought.
It is. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I'm curious, do you think that there are modern day figures who embody that same prophetic spirit?
I do. I think that there are countless individuals and groups all over the world carrying on that legacy.
Right.
They might not be called prophets,
Right.
but they share that same unwavering dedication to justice.
Right.
That willingness to fight for what's right,
Huh.
even when it's hard or dangerous.
And I see it in activists fighting for social justice,
Yeah.
in environmentalists trying to protect our planet,
Mhm.
in human rights advocates standing up for the marginalized.
It's happening all around us.
It's happening all around us.
And it's happening in the everyday choices of people who are striving to make a difference in their own communities.
Right.
Showing kindness and courage.
That's so encouraging.
It is.
It means that prophetic spirit is still alive and well,
It is.
and that we all have the potential to embody it.
That's a powerful message to end on.
It is.
The prophet's legacy isn't just about the past.
Right.
It's about the present and the future.
Right.
It's about inspiring all of us to become agents of change,
Yeah.
to challenge injustice,
Yeah.
and to build a world where everyone can live in peace and dignity.
Well said. And with that, we come to the end of our deep dive into the world of prophets.
It's been a pleasure.
It has. You've explored their struggles, their victories, and their lasting impact.
Yes.
And we hope that this exploration has sparked your own curiosity
Yes.
and inspired you to think about the role of truth and justice in your own life.
In your own life.
So thanks for joining us.
Yes. Thank you.
Until next time,
Yeah.
keep seeking truth.
Keep challenging injustice.
Keep challenging injustice.
And keep striving to make the world a better place.
Jamin AI. Jamin AI, Jamin AI, Jamin AI, Jamin AI, Jamin AI, Jamin AI. Jamin AI. Jamin AI.